Hello, and welcome to a video that is a lot different than my usual content. If you are a long-time subscriber, you might notice that once in a while there's a period of time where I don't upload any content. Why these moments are there has multiple reasons, and one of them is that I play a lot of Minecraft in between projects. There are, however, even more reasons why I never really shared the things that I do or build in Minecraft, but I won't bore you with those today. No, I will bore you or entertain you with how I found this picture and the thinking process that was involved building this thing in Minecraft. And yeah, that's basically it, so let's not waste any more time and let's get started right away. This whole project started off with this one single picture. It's a Warhammer 40k Voidship made by Vaseva. Did I say that correctly? I'm sorry if I butchered your name. Please check out her art station, by the way, she makes really cool stuff. Anyway, I really like this design. The color scheme really looks cool, and the front design with the eagle head and gun really pops out. And on top of that, it's Warhammer 40k related, which is always good. Though this Voidship is definitely something really different compared to all the other Voidships in 40k. There is especially a huge lack of broadside guns and skulls on this one. But honestly, I don't care. It looks really cool, and after debating a couple of weeks with myself, I decided to give it a shot and make it in Minecraft. Also, I do need to mention that I never really use creative mode to build my projects, let alone use world edit. So yeah, mistakes are bound to happen. But enough background talk, let's start building this thing in Minecraft. Which I still couldn't do yet. First, there was some calculations to be made and some problems had to be tackled before I actually could start building. It doesn't take long to look at the picture and see some clear obstacles and problems to overcome. It has a lot of curves and diagonal lines that are not really natural for Minecraft. And on top of that, we only have this side view of the ship. Meaning we have to come up with our own width length, which, if out of proportion, will look very bad or very odd, which you want to avoid, of course. Luckily, we can use Minecraft to find the right width length and even change it later down the line. There's also going to be some pixel art in it as well, which by itself is not a problem, but considering that it has to be placed on a surface that's also going to be curved, it comes with its complications, especially considering that we haven't even decided how the bow is going to be structured. The buildings on top and bottom are very detailed and have a certain architecture that I have to copy, and the bottom part looks very layered with different pieces. In other words, there's lots and lots to think about when moving forward. But what probably is the most important and frustrating part of it all is that I have to calculate a scale that would make this build fit in the current limitations of Minecraft. The artist Vaseva, again, if I butcher your name, I'm really sorry, and please go check out her ArtStation page, it's really fucking good. Actually included a scale on the picture as well, which came in handy. Yet, you might ask, why scale the building down? Well, there are some limitations, mostly on Minecraft's end, which involves building limits in terms of height and length. I want this whole ship to fit in one view, and with the current render distance and height settings, that is not possible on a 1:1 scale. So at first I was going for a 1:2 scale, however that would be stretching it just below the limits and left little to no wiggle room, which would become in handy later down the line. So I decided I would settle with a 1:3 scale. Now, this scale would make the project fit within the limits. Unfortunately, it will be a lot smaller than the 1:2 scale, but what I personally found such a shame is that some parts and details require changes because of it. For example, this decoration part becomes so small at this scale that it would look really bad and unfitting. Luckily, that would mean there is room for my own creative choices, so I didn't really see it as a big loss or anything, but it's just a shame, because, you know, it looks really cool in the picture, and I would like to replicate it as much as possible. But now with a set skill, I could finally start visualizing how I wanted to do this build. And while there were some parts I still had my doubts about it, if I could make it fit into the skill, and one part I even feared that it was kinda impossible to do, I still had many things thought out at this point, and I was ready to start building. First thing I built was just a basic frame. This was to check if the skill really worked well in the boundaries of the set limits, and to finally give the base part a width and play around with that a little bit to find the right proportion. But honestly, setting up a frame is the most boring part of any build. You just move around a lot, you check a lot of distances, and you see if everything is just in proportion. But even though it's the most boring part of any build, for me at least it's the most important one as well. Because from here it helps me to visualize everything else from this point on. This is however where World Edit is your best friend, as you can easily just move some parts a little bit to the left or make just anything a little bit longer without spending too much time doing it by hand. And now with my framework done, I set out a base part for my build. The base part consisted of the back wing, the whole side and the bow, which as a blessing in disguise contained all the problematic parts that I foresaw at the start of this build. Now, if you wonder why is it a blessing, well, to put it simple, if I can make the base work and finish it, it would mean I could also finish the rest of my build without a problem. But with the frame done, let's get started on the bow shape. Getting that shape right is a challenge though, because the success of everything else that's going to be attached to it depends on it. Still, the challenge here is more or less not the shape itself, but how it looks. Making this bow shape, which is mostly a diagonal line in Minecraft, is rather easy. However, the look of it will be very bland, as it will be just a straight staircase basically. And I was aiming to break that kind of design here. On top of that, the eagle head had to be placed on this, which if it was just a diagonal line, aka the staircase design, it would just not work for me with the current insight. And after a couple of tries I came up with this design, and this didn't work for me either. This is one of those moments where I look back at what I built and think I completely misunderstood and forgot my own vision for the project. This happens often when I build things, but it's always the same result. It's annoying as hell and I will have to delete it. I wanted to do something different here than the staircase design to create a good bow line. And instead I created a bow that is completely unfitting and just not working for my build. And it completely missed the mark for what I had in mind. I wanted to incorporate the standard 40k sharp bow that many warships have. I love that design and I wanted to put it in here as well as much as possible. And this is just not it. On top of that, after I filled in the bow and tried to mark out where the eagle head was going to be, I ran into more problems. Problems that were not connected to the design per se, but felt more solvable with another design. So I did what I had to do. I deleted the whole piece and started over again. And after a couple of tries, I finally created a bow I actually liked more than the previous one. Still, it didn't have the sharp bow that is common in other 40k ships. But then again, this ship isn't designed by 40k standards anyway, so it being a bit different is actually good. Unfortunately, I couldn't avoid one thing, and that is the bland basic staircase build style. But I did settle with it after I looked back at the old bow. Looking back at it, I actually started to really question my choices, because it kinda looked bad, or worse at least, compared to this one. So yeah, current design might be a bit more bland than I wanted, but it looked at least closer as I envisioned it. And it was at least a lot sharper than the previous ones. Though maybe it's not that bad that the sharp shape of the bow is missing, because there will be a huge gun slapped in the front of it, which kinda breaks that sharp shape anyway. But before we can install that and blast some filthy Xenos, let's fix the eagle head first. Which in hindsight I might started too soon on. To create a blueprint of this piece, I just made a quick cutout of the eagle in Photoshop and then used one of the hundreds of websites that can translate a picture into Minecraft blocks. Of course, this needed some fine-tuning because I don't need all the blocks in Minecraft existence to be translated into the picture. I basically only needed the black outline, as detailing and coloring I would do myself. Now, at this point I wanted to do something drastically different with the eagle head compared to the picture that Jana Vaseva created. I wanted to make it much larger so that the wings would actually pop up above the ship. This would compensate the still large gap between the bow and the side of the ship, and it would be a good replacement for these smaller artworks, as those wouldn't work well on a 1:3 scale. So I made a translation picture of the eagle and used that to get the outline done. After that I cleaned up the outline and proceeded to do the inside detailing. The eagle head and the outline of the piece itself came out really well from the translation, though the featherwork and the wings were a complete mess, so I had to spend an hour or so fixing that and making the eagle piece look like the piece in the artwork. And once all that work was done, I actually really liked the feathering work I did on this version. However, and I bet you felt it coming, this didn't work out very well either. Not only would it get in the way of the crown on top, but it's also just too big. I did consider at some point a 3D sculpted head of the eagle, but before I could even start on that I had to scale it down to make it fit better with the rest. Which turned out to be rather small and disappointing, and in my opinion too small to make a proper 3D head. Unfortunately, the bad news didn't end there, and things kinda became worse once I placed the eagle head against the bow. Not in terms of placement itself, that actually went rather effortless. It was mostly a cut and paste job where I used the upper circle as my guideline. All I had to do is keep in mind that there was no block, no clipping into the bow. However, the smaller version of this piece, while still looking like an eagle head, lost some of its details, and I tried to add some color to it to see if it felt right, but it actually made it worse. A friend of mine decided to completely ruin the piece and say the eagle head looked like Monty from The Simpsons. So I decided to drop this part of the project for now. It might not look like an eagle from all angles, which was what I was aiming for, yet if I really had to, I was able to bear with the idea that this was going to be it and was going to stay. But for now, a problem for another time, and I really felt like building something less scary and more simplified, aka the front gun. Now, I say less scary and simple, but no, I'm just kidding. The front gun was surprisingly easy. It roughly took me only an hour to get it actually done. Getting the shape down was simple, and the only truly thing to keep in mind was that the gun fitted the proportions of the rest of the build. I kept the connection to the base rather simple though, as I had some ideas how to integrate potentially more fancy details on the bow, but I wanted to save them for later once I added on other things. And while the front gun is very simple, it actually took a very important role. Even with the added yellow color, the white still felt very present and overpowering, and the bow in general felt so simplistic and lacking in details. In these moments I always try to look beyond the visual presentation I have, but that's sometimes very difficult. But having the gun there actually made it a lot easier. Its darker contrasting color and positioning did help to better visualize the working space for the eagle piece and other details. Still, I'm kinda surprised how easy the gun went. I mean, if you look at the rest of the project where there was always a problem to solve, here it was just building it and it was done. Which gave a really good feeling, which I was about to ruin by starting to build the part I feared the most, which I dubbed the lower crown. Why I feared the lower crown the most is very simple. It was going to be a very slow building process, because every single piece of them is unique, and my understanding of World Edit at this point was still very basic. So I couldn't use it to fill in large spaces nor copy pieces around. I had to make them all myself individually, which is not a problem. Again, it's just a very time consuming but fun job, with lots of trial and error and moving everything around. The biggest problem I foresaw at the start was the details in the crown pieces, and ultimately I got rid of them for now. Once the whole build is done, I want to add more textures and shading, and that's the ideal moment to get back to stuff like this as well and see what I could add. There were two big frustrating elements in building the lower crown. One was spacing and the other one was the amount of pieces I had to use, because in the picture there are way more of them than I could fit on my own build. So in the end I settled with the fact that it just had to look alike as in the picture, because there was no way I could fully copy it. This choice also ultimately solved the spacing issue, because I had full control over how far I want them to be apart and such. Considering all the problems that came before, this was not the finest hour of the project, but also not the worst. While I'm glad and settled with the result, I still wish I could have added more. To make myself feel a little bit better, I did add the second gun on top of the bow. Or well, second gun? I guess it's a second gun. It's at least a second gun in my build. Adding that part did add some more shape to the bow itself, and while in the picture it does also an overlay with the bow, I placed it fully on top of it, so I could make something nice of the deck later down the line. Now, at this point I was getting annoyed by the eagle head. It was not giving me the vibes that I wanted, so it was time to change it, and with what better way to change it than slap a circle behind it. At first I skipped on the circle in the back, as the head was at first try too big. And at the second try I was just happy that the piece fitted onto the bow without too much problems, and I didn't want to dabble too much with it, potentially ruining that. But during working on the other parts of the project I did feel like I could use the circle to add more details to the bow and make the head pop out better than it does now. With a lot of pain in my heart, I cut out a large part of the bow and restored the head to not follow the curve of the bow, but instead go straight after the wing joint. This did make the piece stand out a lot, but as I feared, it created a bigger space between the piece itself and the bow. This is where the circle in the back came in, which was able to close the gap enough that I didn't feel the need to just cut off the eagle's head altogether out of frustration. I do have to say that the gun did help here as well, and if I had it there sooner, I might have done it this way right from the start, but that's all in hindsight. Maybe in the future I might add another gun turret or something behind the eagle head, or at least try something like that, because while the gap is a lot smaller, I still feel like it's too big. Plus, it's a 40k warship, so guns everywhere is not that odd. But with a fixed, or well, better eagle head, all that remained for the bow was the top crown, some filling in and coloring. The top crown went as expected, the exact same as the lower crown, though one spot was a lot different. At this spot the crown pieces go from an angle to the left to straight and then to the right. In the lower crown this part was easier to do because the parts are a lot bigger, which means more working space and options to build angles in. But that luxury was not present when working on the top crown. I tried to create the angle transition at the part in the curve on top of the bow, hoping it would help me to make the curve look natural and fluid. But after a couple of tries, I ended up putting it right after it. The best part of the top crown is that I actually could copy and paste some of the parts more often, making my job easier. The coloring itself was of course super easy thanks to World Edit. I replaced all dirt with yellow concrete and the outlining with black I did myself, which is a task I did enjoy a lot. Not only gives it the feeling that the end of a part is near, but when building large structures I always feel like I'm losing sight of it. And getting up close from time to time makes it easier to see how things really are going in terms of looks and details. Yes, distance view is important, and in this case I would say even leading, considering that I'm building this all based off a picture that's just a side view. And on top of that, the build itself is not that detailed yet, but I find getting the details right that are there is just as important as everything else. During the coloring process I did decide to change the lower crown slightly. Now the middle piece crown goes up and around the gun, which I think looks a lot better and really cool and makes the crown feel like a whole piece. Though I am still considering changing little bits here and there, maybe give the gun a wider base or something. But for now, this is it, the base part. And there we go, the first of many parts of this project done. There's still a lot I would have liked to try out and change, but at some point I gotta settle with what I got. And that point is right now. I really hope it was entertaining, or at least interesting to see me stumble and rumble through this project. If it was, be sure to leave a like and consider subscribing so you will be the first to know when the next part of this project is completed. Also, if you have any questions about the basic part or the project in general, don't be shy and ask them down below. I will try to answer as many questions as I can. But with that all being said, I wish you a good day, and until next time.